Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Happy Thursday, best day of the week. Thanks for being here. I want to start off with this. This is from NBC5 Chicago. Leaders in education, politics, and other areas gathered in suburban blah, blah, to ask that the Illinois State Board of Education eliminate history classes at schools statewide. At a news conference, state rep blah, blah, said current history teachings lead to a racist society and overlook the contributions of women and minorities. Okay. It is becoming more and more clear that we are living in alternate universes at the same time. We don't have a shared story in America. We can't agree on fundamental truths of who we are. And if we can't do that, then what are we doing? Like we won't be able to defend the country because we're racist. That's all we are and ever will be. And it's true generationally, right? Like older people are gonna have one story about America and young people are gonna have a completely different story. And even within a generation, it's like my kids will have a completely different perspective of our history than kids who go through woke history class in Illinois. And it's going to be like they're in different countries. And it's gonna be very hard to survive when a vast majority of the country, a vast majority, is taught to hate the country. How can anyone think that that will possibly go well? I think we're already seeing some fruit of that, but what happens when you have an entire generation of kids raised that way? So this is what I wanna do. I wanna share an example of the alternative, right? What is it like when a people know their history, know it deeply and profoundly? So I wanna share the story of Horatius, ancient Rome. So very, very short of the story. Ancient Rome, there was a family, the Tarquin family, and they were the kings of Rome. And they were kicked out because they were awful tyrants, among other things, but they were terrible people. So this is what made way for the Republic, the Roman Republic. So this family, the Tarquins, Sextus in particular, he goes around looking for other kings who can join him in overthrowing the Republic and restoring him to the crown, right? So Sextus found this guy, Lars Porsena. He was a king up in northern Italy. So there's this poem, so these, right, so that makes sense? So Sextus and Lars Porsena team up to fight against the Roman Republic. So there's this poem, it's called Horatius. It's by Thomas Babington Macaulay. It was written in like 1830 or something like that. It is an epic, awesome poem. It's like the whole first half of it is like this like Lord of the Rings style calling of the armies from all the lands to come and attack Rome. And then Rome has these unbelievable heroes who nearly single-handedly defend this bridge that's leading to Rome. It's unbelievable. Let me just quote this one cool scene. But the council's brow was sad as the council of Rome. And the council's speech was low. And darkly looked he at the wall and darkly at the foe. He's like, we're screwed here. Their van will be upon us before the bridge goes down. And if they once may win the bridge, what hope to save the town? Then out spake brave Horatius, the captain of the gate. To every man upon this earth, death comes sooner or late. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers in the temple of his gods? So Horatius is like, listen, we're all gonna die sooner or later. What better way to die than to defend Rome? So he asked for two people to help him. Now who will stand on either hand and help this and keep this bridge with me? Then outspake Spurius Lartius, a Ramnian proud was he. Lo, I will stand at thy right hand and keep the bridge with thee. And outspake strong Herminius, of Titan blood was he. I will abide on thy left side and keep the bridge with thee, right? So these three Romans, Horatius and these other two guys, they we'll do it, right? We're gonna give up our life to fight this massive army to defend this bridge and our city. It's 70 stanzas long. Winston Churchill memorized all 70 stanzas as a boy, and he would just recite it in his head all the time. So these three are, they're beating back every challenger. And then they see Sextus. They call him false Sextus, right? He's the traitor of Rome, the Tarquin. Romans hate this guy, hate him. Horatius has this awesome scene where he just cut off the head of one of the giants. And he goes, now welcome, Sextus. Welcome to thy home. Why dost thou stay and turn away? Here lies the road to Rome. It's like, what are you doing, man? Where are you going? Come on, all takers, let's do this. And then behind him, so the Romans are working behind Horatius to tear down the bridge, right? That's the plan. They're gonna collapse the bridge so that the army can't even invade. So the bridge is collapsing now, and the other two guys, they run back just in the nick of time. They run across the bridge, but Horatius stays. I just want to read this part here. This is a super long poem. Let me just read this part. This is so cool. round turned he, as not deigning, giving dignity, those craven ranks to see, not spake he to Lars Porsena, nor Sextus, not spake he. So he didn't look at the enemies. But he saw on Palatines the white porch of his home. So there's this hill, Palatine Hill in Rome. So he's looking at this hill. He's looking back. The white porch of his home, and he spake to the noble river that rolls by the towers of Rome. O Tiber, Father Tiber, to whom the Romans pray. A Roman's life, a Roman's arms, take thou in charge this day. So he spake, and speaking sheathed the good sword by his side, and with his harness on his back plunged headlong into the tide. So he jumps into the river. No sound of joy or sorrow was heard from either bank, but friends and foes in dumb surprise with parted lips and straining eyes stood gazing where he sank. They're like, what did he just do? It's unbelievable. And when above the surges they saw his crest appear, all Rome sent forth a rapturous cry. Even the ranks of Tuscany could scarce forbear to cheer. It was so awesome what Horatius did, that even the enemy was like, fair play. Fair play, that was pretty cool. Curse on him, quoth false Sextus. Will not the villain drown? But for this day, our close of day, we should have sacked this town. We should have killed taken this city already. And I love this, it's so good. Heaven help him, says Lars Porsena, right? So he's the other king who's attacking. Heaven help him and bring him safe to shore, for such a gallant feat of arms was never seen before. So they end up winning the battle, Rome does, and they make a statue of him. This is why I read this. I want to read this poem here. So they make the statue, plain for all the folks to see. They make a statue of Horatius. And written is underneath in letters all of gold, how valiantly he kept the bridge in the brave days of old. This is my favorite line. And wives still pray to Juno for boys with heart as bold as his who kept the bridge so well in the brave days of old. So still women are praying to God, God, please help my boy become as brave as Horatius. When the oldest cask is opened and the largest lamp is lit, and the chestnuts glow in the embers and the kid turns on the spit, when young and old encircle around the firebrands close, when the girls are weaving baskets and the lads are shaping bows. So the point is just all the time, right? You open up, drink, sitting around the table, cooking dinner, weaving, whatever, all the time is the point. Every mundane task. When the good man mends his armor and trims his helmet's plume, and the good wife's shuttle merrily goes flashing through the loom, with weeping and with laughter, still is the story told, how well Horatius kept the bridge in the brave days of old. Every Roman knew this story deeply and profoundly in their heart. Everything they do all the time, simple tasks all around the campfire, women still pray to God, can my son be like Horatius and these Romans of old? Right? If that changes, again, Winston Churchill read this poem, he memorized every single word of it. That changes who you are. And the question is, do we have stories like this in America that we can all still agree on, that we even know? So compare that with this woman here.
And I will tell you that I have a hard time when I go to the nation's capital every day and people want to talk about the founding fathers. And I'm sorry, but that's not how I view those guys at all, because they were not thinking about us.
Okay, that's Karen Bass, Congresswoman. She's on the short list for Biden's VP, possibly. And whoever's going to be Biden's VP is going to be the president sometime in the next 4 years, right? She's the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, and there she is dismissing outright our founding fathers. So I'm being serious. I don't want to make this light at all. Like, my kids, your kids, grandkids, they will know our founding fathers. They will know all of them. And they will, all 56 who signed that Declaration of Independence, they will know their stories. They will know what motivated them. My kids will read what they read and deeply understand why they fought a revolution for very particular ideas. And it will be epic and heroic and beautiful and true and just like Horatius, because everything our founding fathers did was just like Horatius. From Greece to ancient Rome to England to today. Those are my kids and your kids. And then you have Karen Bass's grandkids who will think that these people are just a bunch of racists. At best, meaningless, and at worst, our founding fathers were forces for bad. So you take these two kids, they're living in different countries. This is not good. One last scene. So during the battle, there was a Roman who was taken captive. I don't know how to pronounce his name. It was Mucius. Sounds like Mucius, but it can't be Mucius, right? That's not like Horatius, it's like Mucius. So they take this guy captive, and Lars orders him this Roman to be thrown into the fire. Instead, the guy takes his hand and shoves it into the fire himself, and he like shoves it in the fire. This is real, by the way. I just read a poem. This is real. This actually happened. He didn't just like put his hand above. He wasn't like roasting marshmallows with his hand, right? He shoved it in the fire, and he said to the king, he said, "Look." He's like, look what I did, right? Check this out. That you may see how cheap we hold our bodies, whose eyes are fixed upon liberty and glory. And Lars is like blown away. So he looks over at the thousands of torches that are defending Rome. And Lars asks this guy if everyone is willing to die fighting. And is everyone as crazy as you are, basically? And the guy says, yeah. He says, for one day's life spent dying for our freedom is worth more than an eternity spent in your chains. One day's life spent dying for our freedom is worth more than an eternity spent in your chains. How close is that to give me liberty or give me death? Or I regret that I have but one life to lose for my country. We have these stories in America. No one knows them. And we're gonna change that. On this show, we're gonna tell more stories so that your kids and grandkids can know them, because we gotta be the antidote to what's going on today. Anyway, the Tarquin king, he begged Lars not to listen to this Roman guy, right? So Lars, the king, he's looking at Sextus, who's like begging him for more power. Like, oh, please, don't listen to him, keep fighting. And then he looked at this noble, brave, free Roman citizen. And Lars said, I seek such resolute bravery, like I seek this in the arms of my allies, not in the armies of my enemies. And Lars, he's like, all right, we're going home. Ended the battle, Rome survived. That was the Roman Republic. Anyone, right, that's a story that lives in hearts and souls. And we have stories like that, but they've been intentionally destroyed to rewrite our history and make this country nothing even worth fighting for. We can't let that happen. Not when our story is just as heroic as Horatius. True story. Thanks, Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, we did a special recently about Marxism infiltrating the church. It's one of my favorite specials we've done so far, and I can't stop thinking about Melvin Tinker. And one thing he said, he's a reverend in England. He wrote this book called That Hideous Strength, How the West Was Lost. And he boiled this down so clearly. I want to play it again. It needs to be played again. And all of us need to understand it. So I think I asked a very simple question. What's the difference between a Christian worldview and a Marxist worldview? Here's what he said.
Okay, well, any worldview tries to deal with four basic questions. First of all, there's the question, where do I come from? The question of origins. Who am I? The question of significance. Why is the world in a mess? The problem of evil or suffering. And then there's a question of, is there a future? That's the matter of purpose. Now, when you think about Marxism, whether it's classical Marxism or what's now called cultural Marxism, what you're dealing with here is a secularized religion, that only the material exists. In the words of the sociologist Peter Berger, we live in a universe without windows. Only what you can see and touch and feel is reality. So the answer to the first question for the Marxists, where do I come from? The answer is nothing. And when I say nothing, I mean absolute nothing. Not that there's something called nothing, there's nothing. And we're a result eventually of time plus chance and the material, that's all there is. Secondly, who am I? Well, for Marx and the cultural Marxists, man has no fixed nature. If you like, you can think of as being plastic and therefore malleable and can be changed into all sorts of things. There's no center. And Marx himself said that it's not the consciousness of men that determines their existence, but rather the social existence that determines their consciousness. And basically what that means is that all we are basically is just a product, particularly for Marx, of our economic and political environment. And then the cultural Marxists went on a bit further than that. One cultural Marxist in particular, called Erich Fromm, said actually gender itself, this is in the 1930s, gender itself is simply a social construct. There really is no basic difference between the sexes. Thirdly, why is the world in a mess? Well, of course, for the Marxists, it's due to capitalism and unjust economic political structures. And this is the oppression of the ruling, by the ruling classes. For the cultural Marxists, they say, yeah, that's exactly the same problem. But with capitalism, you have some things which are inherently wrong with it. Namely, it's sexist, it's racist, and it's patriarchal. And therefore, you have the enslavement of minorities. That's the problem of evil. Fourthly, is there a future? Well, certainly for Marx, yeah. He said that inevitably there's going to be a violent revolution, the overthrow of the ruling classes, the establishment of, if you like, a workers' paradise. The cultural Marxists take a slightly different tact. Instead of going for violent revolution, they say, no, what we've got to do, to use one of their phrases, is go for a long march through the institutions, eventually to capture the culture-making institutions, church, the media, marketing, and especially education. So we shape the way people think and what is considered to be the new norm. And then eventually, following on from that, you can have coercion where you force people to believe these certain things. And eventually, again, you're going to get utopia. So the key for both Marxists and neo-Marxists is that you've got to abolish private property, you've got to abolish the family, and you've got to abolish the church.
That's so good. Well, it's awful, but his explanation's so good. So it makes sense so far, right? So it's, where do I come from? Who am I? Why is the world in such a mess? Is there a future? Those are the four basic questions. So the Marxists, I come from nothing, which is like the most depressing thought ever, right? Isn't that I come from nothing. All of this is just random atoms that came from nothing somehow, right? Something came from nothing. And all these atoms have just combined in random ways. They just bumped into each other in random ways over millions of years. And these random collision of atoms somehow created human beings over time. Right, which is completely contrary to the second law of thermodynamics that says things atrophy, things break down, but for millions of years, for somehow these atoms would combine and form higher level beings. And then here we are, human beings with consciousness today, and feelings, emotions, and the ability to reason and all that stuff. But that's just a random process of chance over millions. Like, how could you possibly think that? It is way crazier to think that than to think that there's a God who created it all. Anyway, Marxists would say we came from nothing. I am whoever society says I am based on arbitrary groupings of intersectionality. And I'm not an individual, there's no such thing, only a member of my group. The evilness in the world is caused by my oppressors. So we need a revolution to overthrow the system so that I can feel happy and fulfilled in the here and now. Okay? That's the Marxist worldview. Here is the Christian worldview.
Quickly, Christian worldview, totally different. We're created by a personal, infinite, triune God. He made a universe as an outflow of his love. Secondly, man is a personal being made in the image of God. We're not nothings, we're something. Loved by him, made to love him, and to be ruled under him lovingly. What's the problem? Well, the real problem is sin, this open rebellion against our Maker. We're wanting to dethrone God. And evil itself is considered to be parasitic on the good. It's a corruption of the good. And then, of course, is there a future? Yes, there is, because God came in the person of the Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of God, on a rescue mission to put us right with him by dying on the cross to atone for our sins, rising from the dead, ascended as the ruler of the universe, sending his Holy Spirit to produce a new community called the church. And as the gospel is proclaimed, lives are transformed and society is transformed. And he's going to come again, and there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. The two could not be different.
Yeah, those are different. So, origins made by God. Who am I? I'm a child of God. What's the problem? Sin. And then what's the future? Heaven. Like, very different worldviews. Now, even if you're an atheist or you're not a Christian or whatever, we all grew up in a Judeo-Christian culture, which had that worldview with it. So you can be a Christian or not, doesn't matter. We've all benefited from a society that believed, that had that worldview, right? What's under attack, like that's what's under attack, right? That's what's being criticized in our critical theory postmodern culture. And if you tear down that worldview, we're going to be left with a very different worldview. And that, the Marxist worldview, is what's being preached to our kids in school and from every aspect of our culture. And dare I say, and this is the theme of the special, even in our church. The church has to decide, your church has to decide what you want to do with Marxism and the Marxist infiltration into the church. Do you want your church to be a tool of the world to further a Marxist worldview? Or do you want your church to be a guiding light to a broken and sinful world? Will you let your church be acted upon by the world? Or will you use your church to bring the Christian worldview into the world? And on that special, we talked to another pastor, Tom Askell, and he said, is the gospel enough? And if you have a Marxist worldview, and if you're going to be a leader of a church or an elder or even a member of a church and bring the Marxist worldview into the church, you're saying the gospel's not enough. Or, does the church have something to learn from the women and gender studies classroom at Berkeley? Right? Does the church need to sit back and get educated by the professors at Berkeley? Or does the church have something to teach the world? That's the fundamental question. If I may, we should do everything we can to keep Marxism out of the church, because it's made its way into a very lukewarm church, right? The lukewarm church in America it's become very reach your potential, be your true self. We all worship the same God, coexist, blah, blah, blah. No. We are using, because of that, we've left this void, we've left this vacuum the American church has. So now Marxism filled it up, and now many churches are using the analytical tools of Marxists, which is absurd, right? It's not just that Marxism is incompatible with Christianity. It's not even that they're just two diametrically opposed. Marxism was designed to destroy the opiate of the people. It was designed to destroy Christianity, among other pillars of society. Why would we ever want to use their own weapons against ourselves in the church? Please go back to our app, the first on the phone, or you can go to our YouTube page and you can watch all the previous shows we've done. But please go back and watch that special. We had 3 amazing guests talk about Marxism in the church, and do everything you can to keep it I was going to keep it at bay, not keep it as far away as possible. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I want to stay on this theme about Marxism in the church for just one more segment. Then we're going to talk with a logistics expert from the Security Studies Group about the Three Gorges Dam in China, which is wild. If you a Drudge or whatever, I've seen a couple little things about it here and there, but we need to know about this thing, because this could be the craziest thing to happen in 2020, which is saying something. So we're going to do that coming up in just a little bit. I want to leave plenty of time for him. But that being said, I love this line from John MacArthur, who's been crushing it lately, obviously, always has. He says, clearly there's an unmistakable line of demarcation between the things of God and the things of the world, which is what we were just talking about, right? Christian worldview, Marxist worldview. He makes it's obvious, so this is a list of cultural agendas that are aggressively hostile to biblical Christianity, an attack on the traditional family by feminism, an active promotion of sexual promiscuity and homosexuality, an increasing acceptance of violence, an emphasis on materialism and hedonism by the secular media, a steady decline in standards of personal integrity and business ethics, an understanding of right and wrong by postmodern relativism, and so on. I want to look at this chart here. This is a perfect... So the point of Marxism is to divide people into groups, right? That's the point of Marxism. Oppressed, oppressor. Put people into groups and then divide. We don't want this in the church. So this is a chart from Robin DiAngelo's book, not White Fragility, it's her other book, What Does It Mean to Be White? This is page 64. So in the left-hand column are she calls them the target group. and on the right-hand side is the dominant group. So it's oppressor. So let me just roll down the left hand. So these are all the oppressed. People of color, poor, working class, women, gays, lesbians, bisexuals, plus, transgender, genderqueer, gender nonconforming, intersexed, people with disabilities, Muslims, Buddhists, Jews, Hindus, immigrants, indigenous peoples, elderly, and children. Remember we talked about children before? Like the oppressor dynamic for Marxists, it's everything, even the relationship between parents, the oppressors, and kids, the oppressed. And one way they undermine that relationship is by intentionally destroying the innocence of childhood, which is why you get drag queen story hour and strippers coming to strippers coming to perform like pole dancing and stuff during assemblies and stuff like that. It's to destroy the innocence of childhood, to reverse that dynamic, the oppressor-oppressor. Anyway, so on the right-hand side is, me, white, middle-class, man, heterosexual, gender-conforming, Christian, able-bodied, citizen, middle-aged adult. So that division, right, that's how these Marxists see the world. Do you want that in your church? You want to walk into your church and say, oh, you're this and you're that and you're this other thing and you're the oppressed and you're an oppressor, right? You want that in your church? It's bad enough we got it in the world. We don't even need it there. You want it in the church where instead of brothers and sisters in Christ, we are intersectional identity groups? Of course not. Because if you do, everyone's going to claim some form of oppression and it's all going to break down and there'll be no unity. Do you remember this is an example of everything breaking down. This is a beautiful story. Do you remember the Wall of Moms? Let me see, I got their Twitter up here. The Wall of Moms, a Portland-based network of women. If you look at the bio here, you notice the word women is spelled with an X. That is very transgender inclusive. And non-binary mother-identifying folks, F-O-L-X. You remember, we did this weeks ago. I said, oh, by the way, you're going to see the word folks written a lot. Because, ladies and gentlemen, that's sexist. And if like, hey guys, so instead of hey guys, it's folks. But F-O-L-C-K-S isn't trans inclusive enough either, so it's F-O-L-X. So there you go. Mother identifying folks. Okay, so whatever, you get the idea of who these people are. So here's the deal. This group was started by mom in Portland, Bev Barnum. She might be like Asian or something. And she was kicked out of the group. Right? She started it, and Wall of Moms kicked her out. So real quick, what is Wall of Moms? Wall of Moms, they all wore yellow shirts, and they stood in front of the police to protect the rioters, okay? And they weaponized their gender and age to protect rioters, right? And it was a great media story. Remember we talked about this website, Beautiful Resistance, I think, .org, and it talks about all these protest tactics. And they had a couple of them, like give the media story, lead with sympathetic actors, and that's what this was. Like Wall of Moms is a perfect example of that. The media just ate it up. They're like, oh, look at these brave women, standing up against Trump's tyranny and whatever, right? So this woman who started, she got kicked out. Why? This is from the Resistance. They called themselves the Resistance on her Twitter page. Think about this. There's a resistance within Wall of Moms, a Portland-based, non-binary, mother-identifying group of folks, right? There's a resistance inside that. So they kicked her off and they got rid of her Twitter page, or they got rid of her Twitter access. And they said this: Wall of Moms started with a social contract. Defer to black voices, shield black bodies. The people who joined this movement of mothers did so with under that understanding. The founder, Bev Barnum, decided to break that social contract. Why is this important? This is another example of something built on the premise of helping black people, legitimized by black people, taken from black people. Is this confusing? Is it disappointing? Is it heartbreaking? Yes, but this is a cautionary tale to all the white groups that have come from this. Do better than Bev. Put and keep black people in leadership. Defer to them. Okay, so just to follow this here. Group started by a non-black woman who was super woke, okay? She started a group of non-binary, mother-identifying folks, okay? She's as woke as you can get. She's in the fight. She's in the cause. She's passionate about it. She started a 501c3, so many groups across the country. There can be many walls of moms all across the country. But because she didn't have enough black leadership, or more specifically, because she did not defer to black leadership, she wasn't woke enough, kicked her out. She didn't bow down enough. So therefore, that made her an oppressor. She wasn't deferring to black voices. She didn't pass the purity test. And no one ever can. No one ever can, and no one ever will pass the purity test. You see how toxic this is? You can see it in your work. We all see it in our country. Now you want to put that in your church? As I've done more research into Marxism and postmodernism in the church, I've seen pastors, black and white, use the term Anglo. Like, oh, he's an Anglo pastor or an Anglo church. Anglo, meaning white. Whoa. And I've heard pastors say we need to defer, like Anglo pastors need to defer to black leadership and all this stuff. You're like, holy cow, what is going on? Like, this is some toxic division. I mean, we know the verse about there's neither Jew nor Gentile, right? But the rest of that is, as God's chosen people, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience. Do you see any of that in Portland? Do you see any compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience? Of course not. Forgive the Lord as he forgave, or forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body, you were called to peace. Peace. One body, unity, peace. Love, compassion, gentleness, patience. The root of Marxism is revolution. There is no peace in a Marxist movement. It's all oppression. And for the love of Pete, the founder was kicked out because she didn't elevate black voices enough or fight exclusively for black causes or whatever, right? If she's gone, right, if that super woke person is gone, wait, they're going to pass by you? No way, watch out. This stuff, it's coming to a church near you, if you let it. True story. Thanks, Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, have you heard of the Three Gorges Dam? So I was just telling some friends about this the other day, and they didn't know anything about it because no one knows anything about the Three Gorges Dam. And they're like, well, what about it? And I told them this whole thing, and they were like amazed, like, Slater, how do you know so much about the Three Gorges Dam? I just stole it off from this guy. C. Kennedy, he is a senior fellow at Security Studies Group who made a killer thread all about the Three Gorges Dam. How are you, brother?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Man, good to talk to you. So where to start here? So Yangtze, or Shanghai, Yangtze River. Mm-hmm. I likened it from San Diego to like Salt Lake City, if that means anything to anybody. And there's this giant dam, largest dam in the world, and it's liable to bust or break, or it's not doing well. That's what I got so far. What else do we need to know?
So it's one of those things that when the Three Gorges Dam was built, the idea was to do really sort of three things. It was to try to control flooding up and down the Yangtze River. Historically, flooding has been an enormous problem in central China because the Yangtze pulls the water in from, Xinjiang and the Tibetan plateaus and where, its headwaters is, and then it just kind of flows through this massive country and all these tributaries and, feed in out of the mountain ranges. And so flooding has always been a serious issue for that. So the idea was, going back as far as the early 1900s, let's build this massive dam and try to control this flooding and really stabilize the situation in central China, agronomically, industrially, the whole deal. Second thing it was intended to do was be hydroelectric. They thought, well, this, let's build a dam big enough, and we calculate it can serve up 10% of the power needs for the entire country. What they weren't counting on was the massive industrial growth of China through the 1990s into the 2000s. So today, the dam only serves about 2% of the power needs of the country. But that's, when you consider how large China is, how big its industrial base is, that's a massive amount of power still. The third thing it was really intended to do was a bit of a vanity project to celebrate, this weird form of communist capitalism, socialism that, China has as a governing and economic structure. So it took them 21 years to, start to finish from first groundbreaking of the dam to building the last components of it, which was the ship lift that they have. And here we are today. So it's been quite a journey for them from an engineering side.
It's
from
massive
the very beginning,
compared to like the Hoover Dam, right? I mean, like dwarfs
absolutely
what we have.
significantly
here.
larger than the Hoover Dam.
So, which is huge. So, has it just been raining a lot, or is the dam just breaking on its own?
Well, from the very beginning, there were, even when they first, opened the sluiceways and said this, it's officially open. That was around 2003. There were reports that there was some deforming, there were some cracks in the concrete, but nothing, so to speak, too big that we can't fix. This year, though, they are having, because it's 2020, of course, we best described as having biblical levels of rain, just absolutely enormous for about 2.5 months when the rainy season commenced. Just that entire from Tibet all the way east towards Shanghai through central China has absolutely just been a nightmare for them of flooding, landslides, all of that.
So all that water is coming into this dam, and the dam can't hold it back. I mean, so I want to talk about what it would look like if this thing breaks, but
sure,
how likely is that, or what are they saying? And obviously, what they're saying isn't true, but what do we know?
Odds of it going down are probably pretty low, just in the sense of you're talking about so much concrete and so much steel. It has held back some flood waters and rains before. The biggest reason I would say the odds of it actually going down are fairly low is because A, they will cut off their nose to spite their face to keep the dam intact, because a failure of it would be so catastrophic to them. B, they have been blowing dams and levees downland to make room for the water to go. And they've been running the sluiceways on that dam hot and heavy for weeks. So they're trying to relieve that pressure on it to avoid a catastrophic failure, which of course is just making the flooding situation downstream towards Wuhan, towards Shanghai, that much worse.
Okay, let's real quick. We'll talk about how bad it could be, right? So you said if this thing busts, you have 100-meter tall, so it's like a 35-story building,
yes,
rushing 100. Like you said, 100 kilometers per hour. I don't even know. That's fast. 30 minutes, a city of 4 million people would just be gone, right? And that would just be gone, right? Totally gone. And then in an hour, another city of 6 million people swept away. 5 hours, another 5.5 million people under 15 feet of water, which that's devastating, right? I mean, I feel we have flooding in America from time to time. I've never seen flooding of 15 feet. And then 10 hours, it would affect this nice little quaint village of Wuhan, which I've never heard of until 5 months ago, with 11 million people, and it would just go all the way to Shanghai, right?
Yes. It would. When you really think about the astronomical loss it would be in human life, in industrial resources and capacity. I mean, that really is the industrial heart of the world. The Yangtze River Economic Basin is what they call it. And upland from the dam, you have, Chongqing is kind of the main one, Chengdu as well. When you get downstream of the dam, you're talking about, Yichang, Yiyang, Wuhan. And because I've been doing work in China for 15 years, logistically, I'm pretty intimately familiar with a lot of these cities that most people have never heard of, because they're huge manufacturing hubs.
Like what? Can you put that into context, either specifics or just big numbers?
Yeah, so China manufactures 28% of all the hard goods in the world. And that could be things like chemicals, it could be furniture, garments, retail, pharmaceuticals, and fertilizer. So 28% of all of the world's manufacturing production is concentrated in China. Half of China's economic production and industrial base is located along the Yangtze River.
Wow.
So when you think about, if all of that were just to blink out of existence for 6 to 8 months because of a biblical flood, you'd be talking about 15% of the world's capacity would just go offline.
Whoa, good night. And that would be way worse than like a COVID disruption, right? You can't just rebuild that.
It would be.
Wow.
I mean, when Wuhan first shut down at the end of, or at the onset of the COVID-19 outbreak, it was absolutely catastrophic to supply chains. Any company that had employees there or factory capacity was dependent on it in some way logistically. When that just completely shut down, it completely altered the flow of ocean traffic. It altered the flow of cargo traffic for, via airplane, and was something that took months to truly unwind, being on the back of the Lunar New Year when they shut down the whole country for basically 2.5 weeks. And then COVID shut everything down for almost a month. So just that one region being on lockdown, the industrial capacity was still there. The machines were all still there. They just didn't have people to run it. Now imagine if not only did they not have the people to run it, but everything just went away anyway. Like it blinked out of existence. All the buildings were gone. All the machines were gone.
Jeez. And then you make in your thread that China would just lash out. I mean, they'd have no choice but to start dropping bombs or doing whatever, going to war with people just to, right? I mean, like, what do you do after that happens?
It's not always a certainty that war tends to follow these sort of apocalyptic events, but historically speaking, not just with China, but just in general worldwide, chaos, conflict, all of that starts to ensue. In China's case, China is struggling with its food supply right now. It's lost 50% of its hog population in the last 2 years because of African swine fever. You're talking about the main cropland of China is located along the Yangtze. That's all already flooding out. You're talking about if they did not import enormous sums of food and protein from overseas, the whole country would be in famine. So blaming others for that is sort of the type of thing that an authoritarian regime would do. And if the dam were to go down, it would be such a stain on their reputation because this thing was a huge vanity project for the CCP, or the Chinese Communist Party, that they would have no choice but to blame an India or a Taiwan or a United States for something like that.
We only got about 2 minutes. How bad is it right now? I know you just sort of touched on that, but even with the dam still staying, how bad are things looking like? In our context, like when I think of a bad disaster, I think of like a Katrina, right? So compared to that, maybe, what's it looking like over there?
They're allowing some news to trickle out about, there's about 2 million people so far that have been displaced. Obviously, the real number is much higher. If you read between the lines of a lot of their press releases where they're talking about where they're doing rescue efforts and things like that, you're talking about a very, very large geographic area where they have just been running full tilt, trying to save lives, trying to save cities and things like that. A lot of towns have been completely washed away. It's already really a humanitarian crisis for them. It's just not one that's so eye-opening that the world's all paying attention right now. Economically, it's been a real problem for them logistically and supply chain wise. There is a lot of delays and disruption there, kind of on the lower, middle and lower reaches of the Yangtze River towards Shanghai. It's still already, even without a failure, the rains are continuing through that area for the next 10 days. It's going to be something that really takes a long time to unwind and to get back to normal, such as it is.
Okay. We gotta go, man. I got. Let me see if you can do this in a minute. How's our decoupling with China going? Is it possible? And then if you could throw that into, I think we've talked a lot about the Belt and Road Initiative. So we're pretty well versed on that enough. But I was just reading through one of your threads about the Blue Dot Network. So I've never heard of that. What's that?
So the Blue Dot Network was, and I'll condense it as quickly as I can here.
Yeah.
Belt and Road, obviously, your viewers are familiar with to one extent or another. Blue Dot Network is designed by Japan, Australia, and the United States to be sort of a counter to Belt and Road, which is to set international standards and lending facilities to build infrastructure in partner countries. So it's kind of intended to be a way of pushing back against the Belt and Road influence and encouraging these countries to be able to build this infrastructure for themselves instead of relying on China.
Is it good? Is it an effective program, you think?
It's just sort of still getting off the ground. Everything I've seen from it is that they have announced it and now kind of seem to have no idea what to do with it. Obviously, a guy like me has a lot of ideas of what to do with something like that, but it's going to take some time to get its feet under. Belt and Road launched in 2013, and we're only now starting to see kind of the geopolitical impact of it in the last couple of years.
Yeah, fair. Okay, man, I hate we got to run. Can we talk again next week or the week after, and we can just really focus on the Blue Dot Network?
Absolutely.
Because I think that's super important. Because we don't want the Chi-Coms taking over the world, which is what they're doing now. C. Kennedy, brother, what's your Twitter handle?
Man_integrated.
That's right. Okay.
It's a legacy.
Man_integrated.
It's a legacy one I've never changed.
we had an econ professor on, and it was Wildebeest 360 or something like that. And it was like his rap name in high school. That was my favorite Twitter handle. All right, C. Kennedy from Security Studies Group. Thanks, man. We'll talk next week.
Thank you, sir.
And that's it. That's our show. True story. Mike Slater. See you tomorrow. We got our special tomorrow. And it's about slavery around the world. And we're going to talk with, among other people, an actual Uyghur from China. It's tomorrow. Mike Slater. Spread the word.